Welcome to Chapter 3, Social Cognition, How We Think About the World, for PSY 235 Social Psychology. In this video, we will be covering Learning Objective 3.1. We're starting off this chapter with a basic understanding of one of the issues that we face just as everyday human beings operating in a social world. We often believe that we know basically what other people are thinking, and based on that we make inferences about why they're doing what they're doing, but we're really not all that accurate under certain circumstances. If we know people really well, we're better at making guesses about what people are thinking, but generally speaking, we think we're way better at understanding other people than we actually are. So let's start our exploration of social cognition with a basic definition. Social cognition refers to how people construct understandings of themselves and others in their social world. Cognition refers to thinking. So social cognition involves selecting information to pay attention to, interpreting that information, filing it away in our memories in connection with other memories that we have of our social world. And we use that social information that we kind of catalog in our minds to make decisions. Like, who am I going to approach? Who am I going to avoid? How am I going to navigate a particular social engagement? You're going to use your social cognitive skills, the information that you've pulled out of your memory, to make those judgments and decisions. What you'll find, after this chapter, we move on to other chapters, we will continue to talk about social cognition in every single chapter after this, because it is so central to what we study in social psychology. The first assumption is that, as I was saying in the previous slide, we generally think we make accurate impressions of the world around us. We feel pretty darn confident that we know what people are thinking and why they're doing what they're doing. Unfortunately, though, we often make the wrong decisions about what's going on in people's minds. You may have heard the common kind of phrase, you never know what other people are going through. Well, we can modify that a little bit to make the point here by saying you never really know what other people are thinking. You make good guesses, but you rarely get full feedback in terms of what other people's thoughts are. Our first learning objective is to explain the advantages and disadvantages of one of our major ways as humans of organizing social information, and that's called using schemas. Before we look at schemas specifically, though, we need to lay out two basic kinds or two basic categories of social thinking. One major category of social thinking is automatic thinking, where we make very lightning fast judgments and assumptions about other people. We also do it with our own thoughts, but think about when you're out in the social world, and I'll challenge you to do this week. If you go to a grocery store or some other place where there are a lot of people around, go to a sporting event, go to the dining hall on campus, try to catch these little thoughts that'll fly by, where you see somebody's face and you have a momentary thought, oh, they look sad, or they look tired, or they look happy, they look irritated. You make those sort of micro judgments in a flash. So that's an example of quick automatic thinking. You're not interrogating, you're not asking a lot of questions, you're just making, the thought just happens without much deliberate intention. Controlled thinking, on the other hand, is thinking that takes effort. Meaning you have to do some investigating. You have to deliberately pause, think about the environment that you're in, really think about the judgments that you're making. So go back to that, messy social situation. If you're faced with a person who you can't immediately, with a high degree of confidence, make a judgment about what they're feeling at the moment, that may make you pause. Or if someone that you know does something unexpected, that makes you pause and you start using controlled thinking to try and take apart why they might be doing what they're doing, and make some judgments as to why. Let's say a good friend, someone you know well, snaps at you and appears to be angry with you. That'll set you back. It'll make you pause and you'll go, that's not typical. What's going on in their thinking? That's effortful, controlled thinking. Now let's dig a little farther into automatic thinking, because it is far more, it takes up more of your time every day, automatic thinking does, than controlled. Controlled thinking kicks in when we really have to pause to make sense of what's going on around us. Most of our cognition during the day is fairly automatic and based on our previous experiences. This kind of thinking is largely not conscious, meaning we're often not aware of these little micro judgments that we make. It doesn't require intention. It doesn't require choices. It's virtually effortless for us. If it wasn't, so, think about it this way. When we walk into a new situation, we're having to deal with it very quickly. There's tons of information. Go back to the dining hall in your mind and think just how busy that situation is. Like, I challenge you, the next time you go into a really busy social situation, look at all of the stimuli that are available for you to interpret. There are thousands of little nuggets of information about that social situation that you could give all of your energy to. You don't have time for that. So we've evolved the capacity to use our previous experiences to shortcut our way to interpretations that are most likely to be accurate, or at the very least to keep us out of trouble. So as your authors put it, people size up new situations very, very quickly, figure out who's present, what's going on, and what might happen next. We do that in every kind of social situation that we're in. Often these really super fast judgments are right. And that comforts us. We like to feel like we know what's going on, including what's going on in the minds of people around us. We're going to use this sort of automatic analysis of our surroundings to contextualize new experiences based on our past experiences. So think about the example of a birthday party. That's a concept, a construct. We've had experiences with birthday parties in the past. And if you're thinking to yourself, okay, what am I supposed to do in my interactions at this party? You know the kind of terrain that's involved in your average party. There's likely to be cake. If it's little kids, there's likely to be games and goofiness that ensues. You use that information from the past to help shape what kind of judgments you're going to make in the present. Part of how we do this is by constructing what are called schemas. If you've ever studied Jean Piaget, like in a developmental class or in an education course where Piaget is his theories of cognition are often presented, he talked about this idea of a schema as a mental representation of a more complex idea. Cognitive psychologists often talk about schematic representations of people, events, categories that you can box experiences into. So I used the example on the previous slide of birthday party. You have a schematic representation in your head of birthday party. You also have a schematic representation of just about everything else that you encounter in your world. You have a representation of everything from what a dog is to what does it mean to be in a dating couple. You have a schema for everything. Now, when we define exactly what a schema is, it's typically defined in terms of being a structure that we hold in mind. So a structured set of parameters that we hold in mind that helps us organize our perceptions of the social world. There's often folders and then subfolders. The computer metaphor only goes so far, but it's useful for kind of wrapping your head around what a schema really does for you. So let's say I have a big schema for dating. Underneath that, I'm going to have a subcategory of bad dates and another subcategory of good dates. There's probably more that I could put in there. I could have subcategories in each of those subfolders for blind date versus not blind date, right? So you have these schematic representations of various social situations, but also types of people. We categorize people based on all kinds of things, characteristics, interests, attributes, beliefs, values, and so on. That leads to what are called stereotypes. Now, stereotype is probably a more familiar term to you. A stereotype is an overgeneralization about an entire group of people. When you have schemas for groups of people, like think back to your high school days and what were the broad categories that you could place most students into. When I was in high school, that would have been in the 1980s, yes, a really long time ago. But we had the geeks and nerds. That I think that probably still exists. We had the band people. We had the theater people. We called them the drama people. We had the jocks. We had the brainiacs, and we had the stoners. There were probably a handful more. But those are category names that basically have a schematic representation for them. And there will be a prototypical person in each of those categories. Sometimes that prototype is based on a real person from your experience. Sometimes it's an amalgam of a whole bunch of different people. Schemas are really useful for us. So if you walk into a big social setting, you use the cues that are built into your schemas to make guesses about what groups people belong to. When we're forced to take pause is when we find out that someone doesn't quite fit our existing schema. This is a stupid example, and I probably am going to regret using it, but right now on TikTok, there's like this mini trend. There's this TikTok creator who is an athlete, and he's an athlete in Scotland, and he happens to be black. Now, the schema for lots of people, because he gets this feedback in comments on his TikToks, wait, what? There are black people in Scotland? And what's happening there is the schematic representation of people in Scotland is that they are very, very white. And seeing someone who doesn't quite fit that schema is surprising to people. So what this creator on TikTok is experiencing is that in some ways he, quote unquote, violates the traditional schematic representation of, quote unquote, Scottish person. And it's led to all kinds of hilarity in this user's account. There are lots of advantages to schemas. Because sometimes students will say, well, if they're so prone to error, why do we use them? Well, because the social world is incredibly complicated and messy, and it's hard to manage all of the information. If you had to really look at every single element of a social scene that faces you day in and day out, you would become quickly overwhelmed with too much information. So we use schemas to simplify by building categories and representations that most of the time are pretty darn useful. They help us organize and make sense of the world. It also helps to fill in some gaps so that we feel more assured that we understand what's going on around us. When we use our schemas, we may not know it, but we're often filling in gaps of our understanding when we're trying to go back and remember something. I think in a previous video, I asked you to think about your 7th birthday party or your 7th birthday experience, whatever it was. When you go back to a memory that's that old, you really have to do a lot of reconstructing. Unless it was an incredibly memorable, like something big happened at that particular birthday event, then it would be stickier. But most of the time, our early childhood memories, when we go back to revisit them, are a mishmash of connected memories that are shaped by schemas about what it should have been like. So if I think about my own birthdays as a kid, it's a real head scratcher because, I think, okay, it should have been like this. We probably had cake, and I really like chocolate cake. And as a little kid, I was really into Texas sheet cake for a while. With lots of thick icing. So I bet I had that, and there were candles, and there was blowing out candles, and I'm quite sure my brothers were annoying because I always thought they were annoying. So you're using your schema about what it should be like to fill in the gaps of memories that you really just don't have. And that makes us feel like we have a more linear, complete understanding of our own experiences. These memory reconstructions tend to be built on your current schemas. So your schema system that's in your mind right now is going to, in a lot of ways, dictate how you perceive your past experiences, in addition to shaping how you understand your present, how you understand yourself, and how you understand other people. In your present experiences. One way that we can think about how schemas and automatic processing works is in terms of two concepts, accessibility and priming. Researchers talk about accessibility in terms of how quickly, how effortlessly can you access a particular schema. Some schemas are right in the front of mind all the time. Others aren't used very often. They may be back of mind. They may only come up under very specific circumstances. What researchers will do is they'll time, how fast can you get to a particular nugget of information. Schemas and concepts that are at the forefront of the mind are faster to access, and they're more likely to influence the way you interpret your social world. Less accessible schemas require effortful thinking to get to, so they're less likely to be used in our everyday experiences. Now, how can something become more accessible? Some schemas are chronic, meaning that we use them so often that they are chronically accessible. Many of our stereotypes that we use when we're perceiving other people are in fact chronically accessible, schematic representations of different groups of people. Sometimes a schematic representation becomes front of mind because of a goal that we are currently pursuing. Schemas relevant to that goal may pop up and become more meaningful, more required. So if you know that you're going to be attending a big anniversary bash for a relative, those don't happen all the time. So you have a schema for parties, a big broad one, but what about these big anniversary bashes? What might that be like? So then you can effortfully kind of go into your schema system and think about what would this be like, and you're only doing that because of this current issue, which is I have to go to this party, right? So it becomes accessible because of a current situation. Some schemas become temporarily accessible because of things that have happened recently. So, for example, you could think about a current event that pops up in the news, and it's in the news, it's hot for a while. That current event can trigger accessible memories from the past. So, for example, as hurricane season kicks up here in the late summer, it often activates for me my memories of Hurricane Katrina, which is about 20 years ago now. So every time I hear in the weather reports, there's a hurricane forming off the East Coast, it's currently tracking through this part of the Atlantic. That triggers, because of, that's a current news item, that triggers my schematic representations of the horrors that these storms can cause. Priming is a technique that we can use in research, but it's also something you do in your everyday life. We can prime people by putting out information that then makes certain kinds of information more accessible. It could be schemas, traits, concepts. If you're dropping breadcrumbs of a thought for a friend, someone you know, what you're essentially trying to do is to prime them so that they will start thinking in a particular way. One example of how schemas can impact us that we all experience, but we often don't understand how it works, and we may not even know that we're doing it to other people. The self-fulfilling prophecy, sometimes students will tell me they think of self-fulfilling prophecy as something internal to them. Like, if you think, I actually had a student last year say, it's like manifesting, right? It's, if you think it, you can make it happen. If you think negative thoughts, negative things will happen. If you think positive thoughts, positive things will happen. Well, that is one way that you can think of self-fulfilling prophecies, but it's not the way we're using it here in social psychology. It's a social interaction between at least two people. So first, when people have expectations about what other people are like, and you have bazillions of them, here's another challenge for you when you're, operating in your everyday life. I want you to catch the thoughts that you have on the fly, which are basically expectations that you have of other people, of what they're supposed to do, what they're supposed to think, what they're supposed to feel. Having that expectation then shapes how you interact with that person. If, for example, you expect someone to be funny, you may start to interact with that person by smiling more and laughing more at what they're saying or what they're doing. So you expect them to be funny, you will find them funnier, and as you're engaging with them by smiling and laughing more, it tends to then cause that person to behave in ways that are consistent with your expectation. So you think this person is pretty funny, or you expect them to be funny, and you show delight, amusement at their behaviors. They're going to do more of those things that appear to have led to you giggling in response to them. And so the self-fulfilling prophecy is you are basically creating a comedian by laughing and engaging with amusement with that person. Now, another example, if you think somebody's going to be mean to you, if you expect that that's what's going to happen, maybe somebody has told you a rumor that they don't like you, and you expect them to be mean, that's going to shape how you act. If you think someone's going to be mean, you're not going to sit near them, you're not going to smile at them, you're going to avoid making eye contact with them. If they interact with you, talk to you, you may avoid long responses, anything to get away from them because you expect them to be mean to you. If you are acting that way toward a person, that person may in fact turn around and be irritated with you, frustrated with you, and may eventually become angry. And that makes your expectations come true. Now, there are limitations to the self-fulfilling prophecy. Sometimes, you make a wrong assumption. Your expectation is false. When you have repeated exposures to the same person over time, their actual, their deep down structural traits and characteristics are going to rise to the surface at some point. You may have an expectation that a person's going to be absolutely lovely, just a nice, kind person. And at first, maybe that's true. And you interact with that person by expecting niceness, and they're nice in return for a while. If deep down they're actually a jerk, eventually their jerkiness is going to show up no matter what you do. So sometimes people's true nature can win out. Self-fulfilling prophecies are also more likely with people we don't know very well and when we're distracted. So when we're making new judgments about who people are and what they're like, and we don't have a lot of background on people, we may just jump to conclusions about what we expect them to be like, maybe based on their appearance, maybe based on things other people have said. And those self-fulfilling prophecies, especially if we're distracted and we don't have a lot of time to do effortful thinking, that's likely to get us into trouble. Now, I put this up here on the slide just to remind you that this is the example that you're provided in your textbook. It's an excellent example. So if you're struggling to make sense of the self-fulfilling prophecy, go back to this image in your textbook and give it another look. It should help you. In our next video, we'll be covering Learning Objective 3.2 and looking at various types of automatic thinking.